Hey everybody, it's Josh. Trying to get out and do a video before it gets too wet out here. There's an old saying, there are no atheists in a foxhole. Now, nobody knows exactly where this started, but it seemed to have spawned from the First World War, which was a just brutal war. It was the first really big war of trench warfare and using gas on people. It was just awful for all sides. And not saying that any war is good, for sure, but that one seemed especially brutal. When you are faced with these final moments, or what could be the final moments, something inside you, I believe, speeds up the process. It makes you want to connect with your maker as quickly as you can. Now, atheists are known to just write off every single thing, every piece of evidence as, well, that could not be true. Well, that I was watching Stephen C. Meyer. He's a very devout Christian scientist. He does a lot of work on DNA and other all kinds of different fields. But he was talking to Joe Rogan about just scientific evidence of God, because that was what his new book was about. And Joe kept pressing him into getting into the personal and his personal experiences with God, because I think that is where atheists try to trap people. I often have a hard time debating. I don't like to really debate. I like to have a discussion. But I can debate. But there are only so many arguments, and there are so many arguments on the other side. And you go round and round. It's a circular arguments, and nobody gets anywhere with it. So really, it all comes down to, for an atheist, I believe, they have to have a personal experience, and they have to be able to accept that experience as not some sort of delusion, as they've told themselves over and over again. I really do think that there's atheists like this guy Alex O'Connor, one of the two. He's as far as atheists go, on YouTube, he's okay. At least he's civil in his discussions. But he was saying that basically us religious people are chasing something that we can never acquire in this lifetime. And that is completely absurd. You have to discount, sorry, the winds are picking up here a little bit, but you have to discount millions of testimonies, millions of experiences where people have anything from a guiding force, feeling like a guiding force is calling them, to more profound revelations. I would put my what I call divine intervention, I would put that in the more profound side. I'm not sure where it falls on the scale. But if I use my personal experience, it can easily be written off as, oh, well, that was just a delusion of yours. Or that was just a coincidence that the deer came out of the woods right after you surrendered to God and were at your lowest point and followed you your entire trip. And not only that, but right before the end of my hike, she walked into the water about chest high, gazed into the horizon, and a wind sort of like what's blowing behind me right now picked up, coming from this tropical storm. It was a fairly calm day. And from that moment on, I have been transformed. But how you can't measure this experience. You can't measure it to use it as some sort of proof. So this is why I don't try to put that forth as evidence right away when I am talking to someone. I will simply say, this is my experience. You know, this is what happened to me. I was just completely miserable before this. And after that, I have not suffered once, aside from, you know, even though I've been in pretty horrible pain, I have been at peace. That signature peace that the Holy Spirit brings you, because of that signature hope that the Holy Spirit brings you. You know, all the markings of what happens with a divine encounter and a born again moment. But see, the thing is, people will say, well, you know, you grew up as a Christian, which I did. I guess my parents were lukewarm Christians. You know, they got involved in the church every now and then, but they weren't strict by any means. And I certainly wasn't any kind of devout follower. But really, the hypocrisy I saw in the churches caused me to rebel against Christianity. I didn't want to be like those hypocritical people. You have to excuse me. I feel a little extra rough just because of the storm rolling in, but you know, it is so nice out now. Figured I'd get this little walk in before the real hard stuff comes. I didn't want to be a Christian. First of all, I wanted my relationship to God to be more personal. I didn't want any guidelines or restrictions on my faith. Not that I have them now. I thought that's what would transpire if I said, oh, okay, I'm just going to be a Christian now. Because everything I would say something and some Christian wouldn't like it and they'd be arguing with me, and one denomination or one sect would be mad about it. One would be like, yeah, that's cool. Nobody could agree. I was like, this can't be right. I honestly thought, okay, usually when I'm checking out a news story or anything in general, I will get both sides of the story, and the truth is usually somewhere in between. So I tried to I started with the major religions, and I tried to study them and find the truth within them. And I said, the truth will be somewhere in between. Because God was guiding me through this whole process. But it didn't work like that at all. All roads were leading back to Christ. Every single one of them. The road to Damascus kept popping into my head over and over again. Sorry, I just found some more mushrooms here. checking them out. Going mushroom hunting today too, if I can. Might be a little too soggy. I just could not accept that something so institutional as Christianity, something so, the Catholic Church hiding all their stuff, I couldn't accept that that was the truth until God showed me himself. So I rebelled against Christianity. And Joe Rogan kept saying, during that debate, he kept going back to the fact that, I guess his comedy club he bought from a former cult. There used to be a former cult that lived there, and he would talk about how these people were tricked by this cult leader into being like almost orgasmic. He was a hypnotist, and he would trick them into thinking they were going to be like saved or something when he touched them. And the feeling was real. But I can understand where he's coming from. That story, hearing that story will make you think, well, if he can do that, then all religious experiences are just BS, There's no way any of that is real. There is something, and you can't explain it. I've been trying to figure it out. I'm waiting. I'm trying to find someone who can explain it. There is it's beyond bliss. It's beyond just peace. It's beyond anything you've ever known. I've had blissful orgasmic experiences from drugs before. Does that mean the drugs are the same as my religious experience? No. This was not anything like drugs. This was not anything like psychedelics. This was not anything like anything I'd ever experienced before. I had wisdom I never learned. That, to me, was one of the most profound things. I started mentioning it on a video, I think yesterday, and of course I got sidetracked, as I usually do. But somebody was telling me that she had dyslexia, and she could never understand the Bible. Obviously, it's even harder to understand, especially when you got dyslexia. And when she was saved, suddenly she could read the Bible just fine. It was no problem. Even the King James Version, no problem for her. And it's things like this that don't make sense. What changes in your brain? I understand that God could actually put little triggers for when you go through this experience, bam, everything has changed. But the most likely scenario is when you have a divine experience and you're dramatically changed, it is the Holy Spirit coming into you. Why do I say it's the most likely? Because there's evidence, repeating evidence of this with people's experiences. Repeating so many times, over and over. And not the exact same way, but pretty similar. But you can't explain that to someone who doesn't know. As I mentioned, I've been talking about this a lot lately, but it is something that it gets aggravating as someone who I'm trying to guide people. Now I understand there's people that I'm meant to guide and people I'm not meant to guide. There was people that Jesus could save and people that Jesus couldn't save. If Jesus couldn't save all the people who encountered him, how are we supposed to even hope to save most of them by guiding them to Jesus? I get it. It's just the way it goes. People are going to be closed-minded. People are not going to understand what is happening. But it is something that I have to keep exploring, because I want to make sure there's no man or woman left behind. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to at least plant the seeds, plant those ideas in their head that, hey, you have a connection with God inside of you. It's whether you want to open your eyes and see, hey, I can actually be saved myself. Or would you rather just be a cynical skeptic and close your mind off to any sort of idea that there's anything above this physical reality? I mean, I can't understand that. Even before I was saved, I was very open to something being, above this reality. I was almost sure of it. I'd heard of near-death experiences. I've heard of, things like the staring tests where people have their backs turned and they have people stare at them and other people aren't getting stared at, and the people can tell when they're getting stared at almost 100% of the time. So how do you explain things like this when there's no way they could have known if they were getting stared at or not? There's things that, there's things that are better than that to explain how there is something above us. But the most likely scenario for our entire existence is a God outside of space and time. Because something outside of space and time has to create space and time. I understand that people like Joe Rogan, who he's talked to a lot of Christians lately. I think he's starting to get called, but he just hasn't talked to the right one, except for the last one he talked to. Can't remember his name, but he was a guy who built these small home communities for homeless people in Austin, Texas, I believe it was, or Houston maybe. And this guy he was completely transformed, just like most born-again Christians. But Joe Rogan still was trying to say, I don't understand, trying to, what about this cult mentality? What about this and that? He is so closed off to the possibility of any of that being true. Maybe because he has mocked Christians and believers his whole life. Maybe that's why. But he himself says he's felt like he's been guided by some sort of force. So if you feel like some sort of force guiding you, why would you deny that? Because you think it's all in your head, because nothing can be above what you know? This dude has done some crazy psychedelics too. I know he's done DMT, which is, I've never done it myself, but it is like literally one of the strongest drugs, strongest psychedelic drug for sure. And it is, I've seen and heard stories about what DMT does to you and what you see when you're in it. It is just incredible. It is, there's people who have met supposed aliens or machine elves or whatever they, I don't even know what they call these people, that they meet in DMT trips. I'll tell you this one quick story before I go. So this one person says they went into their DMT trip and they fell in love with this purple alien lady. I don't know what they call them. And they spent half a lifetime together, he said. And they even had children and, an amazing life together. It was so fulfilling and so amazing. And then, of course, he came out of his trip. Well, a few weeks later or a few months later, his friend calls him up, and he hadn't talked to his friend since before he had done his DMT trip. And his friend says, I met whatever the name of, I just got hit in the head, whatever the name of his wife his alien wife's name was. Called her by name. Said, hey man, I met what's called her? Sarah. I met Sarah, and she told me that she loved you and misses you, and she will see you again someday. And he was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, man, I went into this DMT trip and I met this like purple alien lady, and it was incredible. These two people who hadn't talked, they were far away from each other on different coasts, I think, and they met the same alien, or whatever the hell, whatever you want to call it. There has to be. Now, I don't know, obviously, what the nature of angels and demons and stuff like that are. I've tried to look more into this, especially for the supernatural video that I wanted to do, but I just couldn't. I haven't been able to find the right angle to do it. I can't explain the near-death experiences where people see and hear things and experience things in complete detail, sometimes over a mile or so away, and they are illegally dead. They're dying somewhere. They're there with their heart stopped, completely dead. I don't know how to explain these things. And the only explanation to me is there has to be something more, right? This is discounting every one of my personal experiences. If you can't even open your mind to there could be something more, and everybody's personal experiences are completely written off automatically, then the person you are talking to, you might as well just move on. Because they are so closed off, and only God is going to open their eyes, if they're going to open their eyes at all. Now, I'm not saying you have to give up on these people. No, not by a long shot. What I'm saying is just understand they don't believe you. They're not going. You could tell them, you could show them a video of God descending from heaven and coming forth to tell you some great secret, and they would not believe it. They are automatically going to reject anything that you say when it comes to spiritual or religious experiences. Honestly, I was closed off in a similar way for a long time in my life. It's just a phase you go through sometimes where so many people have lied to you, so many people have tricked you in so many different ways, and you just do what you just have that mindset. No, I can't do that. All right, everybody, I'm going to get off of here. It's getting warm out. The sun's coming out a little bit. I think the storm's going to be here within a few hours, though. So I'm going to try to do a video tomorrow, but I have one video I've shot before I might release tomorrow. We'll have to see how I release these things. But I love you all. If you have a YouTube page or any business to plug, let me know. I'm trying to figure out the best way of getting this connection that we have. Getting a community, a congregation. We are all in this together, and we all have to lean on each other. It's going to be a spiritual war. We're already in it. It's going to pick up, just like this wind. I love you all.